Have you ever thought that actually a lot of business self-help books are slightly overcomplicated? Have you ever thought that the route to a successful business is slightly overcomplicated? Well, today's interview is with a chap called Carl Reeder, who has started and run so many businesses, has been ahead of the curve on so many things, bringing so many different systems to the UK, and has been a director on so many businesses, helping them be a brilliant success. His new book, Boss It, comes out in October, and I have had the pleasure to interview him about the book and his experiences of making business really simple. Carl, by his own admission, is someone who has always thought that business wasn't for people like him. To him, business seemed like it was exclusively for the rich and wealthy. Studying business studies at GCSE, it seemed like it was only focused on the biggest of businesses. And when he entered the workplace, it seemed so damn complicated. Probably because most people in business have a vested interest in making things so complicated. So his mission is as being fairly simple. He takes what seems like a really complicated idea and makes them so easy that an 8-year-old can understand it. Sharing his thoughts through his books, articles, on stage, and through broadcast media in plain English. He is so smart. He makes sure you know there are 5 key elements of scaling a business, 4 things that are essential for any business owner to make sure that they keep doing to avoid failure, and the tricks of the trade from his own many years of experiences and from advising others. Carl is sharing this and more in his brand new book, Boss It, Control Your Time, Your Income and Your Life, which is due out on October the 3rd, 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the UK's best kept business secrets, obviously next to me, of course, Mr. Carl Reeder. How are you, Carl?
Hey, Mark, I'm great, and thank you so much for that introduction. Do you know, it's almost as if I'd written it myself, but I hadn't. So very touching of you to share that, and an absolute pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Mate, there are 4 parts to this book, which is genuinely a really great read, by the way. Honestly, I'm gonna help you promote it as much as I can because it is massively engaging. It's really simple to read. And it's really timely, as we talked before we came on air, actually. So I want to kind of touch on each part. So as we record this, unemployment is up to 2 million. 2 million workers possibly still, no, it's not. Unemployment's not up to 2 million, not yet. It's up to 4.1%, but 2 million workers still on furlough, which is nervous times for a lot of people. If people do find themselves unemployed, why should they become their own boss?
Okay, so I want to unpick that in a couple of different ways, actually. So first of all, thank you so much for the comments about the book. I saw a gap in the market, and I'm sure we'll come on to all of this later on, but I saw that there was a real missing space for something in the small business space. But in terms of why people who are coming off a furlough should be their own boss, I don't think it's for me to say whether they should or whether they shouldn't. However, if we unpick the being your own boss phrase, as you said in my intro, a lot of people think that business isn't for people like them. You know, if I look at my own example, you know, I came off of a council estate. I just had a very normal upbringing, and business studies seemed like glass buildings and share prices and all of that stuff. It didn't seem like the reality of business, which is finding something for a £5 and selling it for a £10. I never made that connection at a young age. But also, what I never made the connection of is that being your own boss doesn't necessarily mean that you have to run a global corporate, or it doesn't even actually mean that you have to be self-employed. I think that being your own boss, there's actually something deeper than that, which is a mindset shift that you can make, which is where you can choose to control your time, your income, and your life. The eye-opener for me on that was reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, and that book kind of opened my eyes that there's a different way of living. You know, I'd read quite a few of the business self-help books before, you know, the likes of The Myth Revisited and 7 Habits and Getting Things Done by David Allen and Influence by Cialdini. all of the stuff that we all know that we should read and we should absorb. And the missing point in all of those books was that they would help you improve on an industrial age process. But actually, the 4-hour work week opened my eyes to the fact that, you know what, you get one life and you can control it. You can be your own boss, even if you've got a boss. And I think LinkedIn actually used that strapline, be your own boss, even if you have a boss. So that's what being your own boss is all about. And as we're coming up to a point of what is going to be horrific mass unemployment in my eyes, the furlough scheme has artificially propped up the employment world. We've had the stamp duty scheme artificially propping up property prices. I think that the economy is walking on stilts at the moment. And that's not just to share doom and gloom. That's the reality that the government stimulus has to stop at some point. And it's the same here as it is in the US and Australia and everywhere else. These stimulus packages will stop, there will be a cliff edge, and there will unfortunately be casualties from it. We as individuals have got the choice of whether we go back for more of the same, or whether we decide to be our own boss, whether that manifests itself as freelancing, whether it manifests itself as self-employment or starting a business, or indeed, trying to create the next unicorn, or simply just taking a job and having more ownership of that process. But I think that with coronavirus in particular being a public health issue as well as an economic issue, we've gone through recessions in the past and we dip down, we come back out again, we dip down, we come back out again. But very rarely is a recession combined with a life-changing event. And a life-changing event, I mean like a war or a pandemic. And because it's been a very real public health issue, it's hit all of us deeply. We've all known people, or perhaps are very close to people who've suffered from COVID. We've all seen the horrific images of hospitals being overburdened overseas, and we've heard the messages that are out there. And I think that there is genuinely a belief amongst people that, a very accurate belief, but we only have one life, but a belief now that we've got to take control of that life and we've got to do what makes us happy. And if we want to retire to the country, or if we want to move abroad, or if we want to work on our own terms at home rather than in an office, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And certainly on the economy, it's it has been artificially propped up, and I think once those props are taken away, I think there will be a lot further heartache going forward into 2021, unfortunately. But I want to move on to, I love the phrase that you used during lockdown, and it kind of goes to show that some really, really good people in business wanted to help as many as they could. Mine personally was reflect, refresh, rebrand and relaunch, but yours is way more simpler. Restart, rebuild, and flourish. Talk to me about those stages.
Hey, sure. So yeah, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, I see my job more than just being an expert. I think that every man or every lady and their dog is an expert nowadays. So I see my job actually to be a translator, to take what can seem quite complicated and abstract and bring it to plain English. And Restart, Rebuild, and Flourish was just the identification of the businesses that I saw that needed to either pivot and change their direction, or they needed to close their doors and do something. All of this stuff that was going on, it was really simple. And it was actually inspired by a good friend and a client of one of my businesses, a guy called Wayne Stokes. And Wayne is a martial arts school instructor. He has a very successful dojo in the Midlands, and he...
That's right, I've met Wayne several times, yeah.
Yeah, so Wayne, the eternal 21-year-old. I don't know how he does it.
Absolutely. I know, isn't he about 102 yet? But he actually
I have no idea.
But anyway, he looks like he's 21.
He does. He's got this youthful energy about him, and, he's lived the dream, driven the Porsche, all of that stuff. But anyway, Wayne said something really quite almost stoic, in that he doesn't care if coronavirus and the government shut down his business, because do you know what? To start again. But he's not starting again from where he started 25 years ago. He's starting again with 25 years worth of experience, having made all the mistakes and able to smash it another time. And just that approach and that mindset is the approach and mindset that's needed to drive through this. But hey, look, if you need to restart your business, if you need to pivot, I've seen businesses, so I've seen a clothing manufacturer go from producing goods in China and supplying it to ASOS and TK Maxx and so on. They've had to completely pivot because they were hit back in January through COVID. And they've set up an online website, they're manufacturing in the UK, they've totally pivoted their business. But this spirit of, you know what, we can't control where the goalposts are placed on the football pitch, we can't control where the lines are drawn, but we can control how well we play on the pitch. So let's restart our plan, rebuild it, and just prepare for the new future. And it really is as simple as that for all businesses. Now, some businesses will actually feel that coronavirus hasn't particularly affected them. You know what, I hate to say it, but surprise, surprise, it has. Tesco's would have absolutely flourished over lockdown, I'm sure. Amazon would have absolutely flourished. But there are going to be fundamental shifts, Mark, in our desires as human beings. I think that we are a societal being. We enjoy and thrive off of human-to-human contact. We're going to have to find new ways of managing that, certainly over the lockdown period and possibly beyond. Beyond, we're probably going to find that office premises are far less desirable for businesses, as individuals who've had the taste of working from home, they've had a taste of control, and they're going to want it on their terms, not their employer's terms. They're going to want to choose to start at 10 if they want to take their kids to school. They're going to want to choose whether to work from home behind a video camera, as we are right now, or whether to be in the office. But the key thing here is that they're going to want both choices. They're not going to want a choice of one or the other, because we've all had flexibility. So there's a minefield of shifts and mindset changes that have gone on. And in fact, probably as deep as paradigm shifts, shifts in our underlying beliefs about what we're all about and where we're going and what our own personal goals and aims are, that are going to cause businesses a need to have to reflect on what they do, how they do it, and the benefits that they deliver.
Absolutely. It's been like a massive pebble effect, hasn't it? It's just that massive ripple that's going through so many different industries in so many different ways. I know it's slightly cheeky, but I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago who works in a hotel. He's on furlough at the moment, and he just mentioned it. It was a really flippant comment, and he said, people that haven't done well out of coronavirus, paper merchants. And I just sat there and I looked at him quizzically. And he said, well, you ask anybody that's been working from home how much stuff they've printed off in the last 20 weeks. Yeah. And it hadn't even occurred to me that when you're in an office environment, the amount of paper that gets wasted and photocopied, et cetera, everything's now gone digital.
Hey, there's so much with this. So my last two books, you can see you've got the Franchising Handbook there and the Startup Coach there. So these two books were published in the traditional way. So I was fortunate enough to be published by Hodder & Stoughton, who are the world's second biggest publisher. And naturally, they have access to Waterstones and so on. So I could go into any reasonable size Waterstones. Don't get me wrong, I'm not J.K. Rowling, so I'm not on the window of every shop. But as long as the Waterstones had a second floor or a devoted business space, my books were in there. This year, while still being with a major publishing house, I can't guarantee that the bookstores are going to hold my books, because people don't want to buy paper books from a shop where someone else might have flicked through them. It's a bit gacky, and do you want to go out shopping with a mask on, and all of this stuff that goes with it. So the entire world is shifting, and tech, I think, is a perfect example. There was a bit of a joke circulating around LinkedIn, which is who has developed your tech in your business the most over the last 10 years? Was it your CTO? Was it your COO? Or was it COVID-19? And the reality for many businesses is that pretty quickly they had to work out their tech strategy. They had to find their collaboration tools and their video tools and so on. Even us, we were the UK's first online accounting practice. I'm pretty confident I can say that, as we were doing it back in 2002. We brought Xero over to the UK 2007 at D&T. We've always been not just ahead of the curve, but pointing the curve in the right direction is probably the way to put it. But even us, we had to go out and buy 5 laptops and just hope that they got delivered before Boris said the offices were shutting down. We had to quickly retrofit a few bits and pieces, probably 5% of what we do, we had to tweak, we had to plaster over, and then we had to come up with a minimum viable product for 100% remote working, and then adapt along the way. So it's been a dramatic shift, not just in the tech adoption, but it's been a shift in what we do, how we do it, what we're going to buy, the activities that we're going to undertake over the next 5-10 years. And also for the next generation, the next generation are a real passion of mine, to make sure that they're not lumbered with the same, how can I put it, the same negative limiting beliefs that the education system put into me. The next generation, they're going to be, certainly those who are in school at the moment, or perhaps in college and university more accurately, they're the ones who are going to be judged at their job interviews by the question of, what did you do during the coronavirus crisis? Did you volunteer? Did you take up a job with the NHS phone lines and the support? And did you deliver shopping? And did you help your neighbours? And that's the way we're going to judge people. It's going to be through their actions and how they came through COVID, not how well they were doing before COVID.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree with everything you said, man. This is great. I'm loving this so far. Part two of the book is about planning. And as well, both of us work with people who seem to have none whatsoever for many different reasons. What makes a strong plan, and why should people have one?
Hey, so I'm going to answer that by separating two aspects of plan. A lot of people, when they talk about plan in a business sense, they talk about business plans. The reality for most of us is that we attach the concept of a business plan to getting a loan or getting funding, let's be honest. And I'm saying it as somebody who, one of my business investments is a company that writes business plans and gets funding. I'm saying that as somebody who really sees the benefit of a decent business plan. But the reality for most businesses, hand it to your bank manager, get your loan, put it in the drawer, and hopefully never look at it again. Now, there's two sides to planning. There is the business planning process, but there's also the planning that should take place day to day, week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. The planning of the business that goes beyond the dreaming and the big picture entrepreneurial thinking, but actually takes that thinking, takes that abstract vision, and reduces it, chunks it down into actionable steps, which ironically traditional business plans are normally extremely lacking in. Now, the problem with planning is twofold. First of all, some business owners see that the business plan, so the document itself, is the limit to the planning process. So not only do they go into it with the intent of raising funding, they go into it with the intent of ticking the boxes and putting in the paragraphs and putting in the numbers that the bank manager expects to see. Now, I've not known a business that's been able to effectively scale through a executive summary and a templated SWOT analysis and a CV of the owner and a couple of P&L projections. That just doesn't happen. And look, I've seen and worked with some of the biggest global companies. I've seen and worked with the likes of Centrica British Gas, Stanley Black & Decker, Arsenal Football Club, Oak Furniture Land. We helped scale them up until the point they needed someone far bigger than us. Just household names, Anytime Fitness, Subway's, the lot. So I've seen how these companies work. And whilst the PR spin on some of the younger entrepreneurial companies is that they just go for it and they have a dream and they go for it, there is a point in between, which is the planning, and it's vitally important. On the flip side, it's really important not to use planning as an excuse for creative avoidance, because there's a couple of traps you can fall into. The first one is to try and get your plan penny perfect. And the reality is there's always overruns, both in cost and time. Anyone who's engaged an IT company to build a website will know that it never comes on time. Stuff just doesn't, IT people in particular, I don't know why, but if you're building an app or a tool or whatever, it doesn't happen on time. A second thing, anyone who's perhaps had some work done on their house will acknowledge the time, but also the cost overrun. Things never go to plan financially. And the odds of you getting every penny perfect in your plan, you've got more chance of winning the lottery. And I'm not just saying that flippantly. My copy editor, the publishers, called me out on that. But the reality is every business plan has got at least 300 numbers in there. If you can get them penny perfect, then you can pick my next 49 balls for the lottery because you're going to do better. It's just a mathematical fact. So you need to acknowledge that, but there is sometimes an obsession on business owners to get it perfect. There's also on the flip side, the tendency to skim over it and not do enough. Add to that the fact that anyone can become a millionaire on a spreadsheet. It's really simple, but you've got a key on your keyboard with 0 on it. All you do, you need to press that a few times and you become a millionaire. Given that we as potential entrepreneurs go into a business planning process with optimism, because who on earth would plan for a business pessimistically? Who on earth will think their business is going to fail before starting it? There is a temptation to either gloss over it and become too optimistic, or to over-obsess with perfection. And there's a sweet spot. It's really difficult to identify what that sweet spot is, but that sweet spot, in my opinion, is when you can identify the second and third bounce of the ball. Now, that analogy came from a book, which I can't remember the name of it. I think it was The Second Bounce of a Ball, but don't quote me on that. But it said that the world's greatest footballers don't look at where the ball's going to land. They look at where it will go on the second bounce or the third bounce. So they run towards where the ball's going to go, not stand in a place where the person can pass it to them. Because if they stand there, the defender's going to come along, slide tackle them, take off their legs. Yeah. So that concept applies equally to business, in my opinion. It's not about just looking at the first step and what you need to do. So let's say you're building an app. Your plan isn't to get to the app being developed. Your plan is actually go to market, continual marketing, etc., etc. You plan that out. You have much more clarity at the early stages, but then you have a looser vision and tactical structure to work within for the next steps. But then you just need to move on to the third step, which is taking action. And rather than sitting behind a computer and designing business cards and polishing your shoes and going to networking events, you know what? You pound the streets, you knock on the doors, and you're trying to sell your product.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and you're absolutely right. The amount of people that do obsess over business plans, or there's nothing in place. There are so many businesses that there's almost no in between, and you're absolutely right. That is where the sweet spot is, and it kind of brings me neatly onto the next bit, which is about doing it, because you've talked about sort of just going out and knocking on doors, and you talk about at length probably the importance of systems and processes. Talk to me about the differences about systems and processes and why they're both so important, because I think there's a lot of confusion out there with people about systems and processes.
Yeah, of course. And do you know what? I'm guilty of it myself, and I'll probably do it today. We use the terms interchangeably. We use the terms, systems, processes, procedures interchangeably. A great way of, highlighting that is that we could talk about, I don't know, a finance system, and we could be referring to the likes of Sage or QuickBooks or Xero or whatever. But in a business, a system is the bigger picture, and then you have the processes within it which have individual procedures. So that breaks it down. Now, what I do in the book, and it's really boring, but I talk about on the action, there is a need to make sure that you can actually fulfill what it is you're going to say you're going to do before you go out and sell it. And yes, in business, sometimes there's an element of go out there, sell it, and work out how to do it. There has to be an element of that at some point, because over-perfection can kill this process as well. But the problem that I've seen in many businesses is that they focus on how to get leads. They get leads, they then work out how to convert them and take the marketing into a sale. They get the sale, they then work out how they're going to fulfill the service. How are they going to satisfy the customer? So those 3 steps, and you actually need to, and perhaps conversely when starting a business, you need to flip that on its head. You need to work out how are you going to look after your customer? What is it you're going to do? So if you're selling products, this sounds really obvious to anyone who's not in business, but entrepreneurs tend to look at this in the warped way of getting customers first. But if you're going to get customers, you sell products, work out where you're going to make your product, work out the product spec, work out where you're going to store it. You wouldn't order a load of stock before having a warehouse, for example. And this stuff applies equally to services. It applies to any business. You need to make sure that you've got your capacity and you've got your customer fulfillment in place, or at least how you're going to do it, before you then work out how you're going to sell it. So you work out how to sell it. And again, working out how to sell it might just be reflecting in your own mind on what the value proposition is, reflecting in your own mind the words you're going to use, the way that you're going to bring your customer through the sales process. Will it be face-to-face? Will it be video call or phone call? Will it be completely online? Will there be a lot of automation, or all of this stuff? But you work out how you're going to do that, and then look at things like ClickFunnels and so on. As I say, most business owners focus on the lead gen as the very first thing, and then they get their email list, which is great, and they've got what they see as a tribe, but they've got nothing to sell to them. They don't know how to sell it. So there is, unfortunately, at the action stage, there's a bit of engineering required at the beginning to make sure that you can actually fulfill the dream that you're then going to sell, and then the dream that you're going to promote. Just want to touch on one other thing, if you don't mind, Mark, and I appreciate you darting all over the place.
No, this is great. There's some great knowledge bombs here.
I've had the privilege of caffeine. I just want to touch on some nonsense that's out there, which is the no plan B hype. So there are a number of Instagram entrepreneurial accounts and so on with images of private jets and Lambos and all of this stuff, and people saying no plan B. Quite frankly, you need a plan B, you need plan C, D, E, F, and G as well before you take action. Because as a responsible entrepreneur, you're going to have not just your own family's livelihood depending on you, you're going to have tens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of livelihoods relying on you. And let me tell you from personal experience, having thousands of stakeholders, clients, staff, and so on and so forth, even if you just look at your staff, having their livelihoods resting on your back is not a nice place to be if you don't know your plan B, C, D, E, and F. So forget the motivational nonsense and actually make sure that you're going into it with a considered, planned approach. It's not sexy. It's not going to win you likes on Instagram and so on. It's not going to sell get-rich-quick schemes and so on. But when it comes to building a successful, scalable business, it's a no-brainer.
Mate, I totally agree. And it leads us really nicely onto the next question, what you just said, actually. It's probably the largest part of the book is saved for scaling a business. And as we both come across so many owners that want to grow, and the thing that really kind of stuck out for me was the section on the leadership model. As we both know there kind of has to be that mind shift from business owner to leader. So what are the most important things that a business owner has to remember as things change and they turn into a leader?
Yeah, sure. So, I've been through this process myself. So I'll, rather than regurgitating what's in the book, so the book's got the tools and the how-to. If you don't mind, Mark, I'll share the experiences and what I learned along the way. So it's not the textbook self-help stuff, but actually, I guess, the pains and the frustrations and the happiness and so on that I went through. So I guess it was probably 2010, 2011. In fact, no, sorry, we went a bit further. So probably about 2005, 2006. In an accounting firm, I stopped doing accounting. I was a square peg in a round hole, didn't enjoy it. And I got offered in 2007 the chance to buy into the practice. So to form a management buyout, and we took the team from a team of 8, including myself, up to about a team of 60, and just, we did a really good job at scaling quickly. We absolutely conquered our niche market. We got the tech innovation, we got the awards, all of that stuff, took it to a multi-million turnover business. And that was great. But from that stage up until about 2014, I'm going to guess 2015, I was very much involved in a hands-on leadership role. But it wasn't truly leadership. It was quasi-leadership because it involved a good proportion of management as well. Because the tier of management that I put in wasn't always up to where we'd want the tier of management to be. They were great at their job. So to use the Michael E. Gerber expression, they were great technicians, but not necessarily great managers. They became overqualified technicians. So that was some growing pains that we went through as a business, where we learned along the way that actually management is a job, much in the same way that you wouldn't promote your junior accountants to senior accountants to then become the cleaners or decorators. you shouldn't promote your junior accountants to senior accountants to managers. So we learned that, and we realised the need for investment in the skill sets and so on. But from 2015, I was on a gradual process where I was needed less and less in the business. So I'd been, I guess, leading the strategy in the business development, and where we get our new clients from, what are our steps for the next 3, 5, 10 years. And I'd built a team around myself, but I was needed less and less. And quite frankly, I was employing better people than me. And that's probably the biggest tip for business I can give. Get over yourself, employ better people. In 2019, so Feb 19, I think it was, I decided to make the official step, having not been in the office for about a year or so, made the official step of stepping away from the business and becoming non-exec chair rather than in an executive position. So I did that jointly with my business partner, Ben, and we had already groomed the board, and they'd been working in the roles for about a year or two before as managing director, operations director, finance director, and so on. And it was really strange because as a true leader, you have two jobs. And this was shared with me by a guy called Brad Smith, who's the chairman of Intuit and Nordstrom's in the US. And he said, it's really simple. You set the vision and then you get out of the way. And for somebody who's scaled the business and has been very hands-on in taking it from a small business turning over, I don't know what it's turning at the time, maybe 500K, but scaling up to multi-million and really making the business a well-known name, both in its own industry, but also the markets it serves. Mm-hmm. It was really quite difficult to take myself away, and it was quite difficult to get out of the way. So I had to focus on making sure that from a leadership perspective, realigning myself so that I serve the board rather than the board serving me, because the traditional structure of a business is that each layer serves the layer above them. So you have your technicians, whatever it is you're doing. So let's say we're talking about Tesco's here. You've got those on the shop floor who are then serving the managers who make sure that everything's put out properly, who are serving the buyers, who make sure that the goods are brought in at the right time, who are then serving the store manager, who's then serving the regional manager, who's then serving head office. Every layer serves the layer above. Now, what I had to do was to come to the realization that actually, as as true leader of the business, I serve the rest of the team, and it's my job to really help facilitate, but without taking any of the glory. Which, trust me, as somebody who's done it and likes being front facing and so on, that's really bloody hard bitter pill to swallow. So that was tricky. The second thing that was tricky was that because I'd been doing it instinctively myself, not necessarily following my own advice. I'd love to say that I followed the lessons of Bossett word for word, but I didn't. This is the stuff, but some of it is what I wish I'd done 10 years before. But given that I'd done it instinctively, there was stuff that would happen in the business, and it still happens, where I'd look at it and think, you know what, you're off your rocker. I know exactly what you need to do in that situation, or give us it here, I could do it in 5 seconds. Now the problem is, as a true leader, if you do that, you undermine the value in the position that you vested in the person who's serving as a board member or as a manager and so on. So I've learned that unless something is a £1 million decision, I shouldn't get involved. And it's really hard because something might cost me 10 grand. And whilst it might seem to some that 10 grand is a drop in the ocean if you've got a multi-million business, let me assure you, it doesn't matter what your numbers are on your P&L. It doesn't matter what you've got in your bank account. 10 grand is 10 grand. And, maybe that's the, I don't know, maybe that's a council estate lad coming out at me, but 10 grand is a car or a bloody nice holiday, or, it's a lot of money. It's more than most people dream of. So it's actually emotionally really tough to let go of these things where, the net effect might be 1,500 quid. And you think, bloody hell, that's 1,500 quid. I want 1,500 quid in my pocket, not lost in waste. But you need to allow this stuff to happen because the cost of undoing it and the cost of undermining the structure that you put in and the cost of the development of the team is far more than that. And you know, that's one of the real tricky conflicts as well. So yeah, leadership's been tough. I think that's the simple way for me to sum it up.
Yeah, and there's a real theme sort of like running through that, the amount of people that struggle to sort of like let go of things that they've been accustomed to doing for so many years. And it's, you know, your experiences there have just, you know, probably reinforced that it's probably one of the things that people really need to start thinking about as their business grows. Man, this has been absolutely brilliant. This really has. There are so many knowledge bombs in this. It's unbelievable. Carl, where can people find out more about you, my friend?
Okay, so the easiest way is to hunt me down on social media. At Carl Reader on all platforms. Look for the blue tick, you'll find me. I would love for anyone who's listened to this, I would truly love for them to send me a message, let me know how you found the episode, and you know, just let me know if there's any content you'd like me to create or anything. I'm open to suggestions and speaking to people. You know, I'm a social being myself. My book, Boss It, as you kindly mentioned, is being released 3rd of October in the UK, 27th October globally. So we've got the rights sold for a few different translations and so on. So really exciting times. That can be found certainly for the UK on http:// hope I got that right. Carl.to, CARL.to/book. So that's a direct link for the book. And Marc, thank you so much for having me as a guest.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Like Carl said, his book is out on October the 3rd. It's available on the link. I'll put that link in the show notes. It's also available from Amazon and probably all good bookstores and probably a few dodgy ones as well. But I will put all the links in the show notes. Carl, it has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much, and best of luck with this amazing book.
Thank you.